Daily Detroit is brought to you in large part by our members at patreon.com/Daily Detroit. Get swag, access to our member-only Discord chat, and know that you're supporting local media. After all, local media cannot survive without local support. So join us at patreon.com/Daily Detroit. Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Daily Detroit, sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. It is Monday, September 9th, 2024. I am Jer Stays, and as he is joining me at the beginning of every week, all the way up through Election Day, Steve Freese, veteran journalist, New York Times, Newsweek, lots of great places. You can also find him, who does the A2 View newsletter for the Ann Arbor Observer. Steve Freese, always good to talk to you.
Good evening.
Yes. It's been a crazy one. So here's the thing. I feel like we've got polls to talk about. We've got a Regent lawsuit to talk about. We've got a little razzmatazz. Why don't we start on this crazy thing that seems to be some sort of polar coaster that we are riding? Because I cannot make heads or tails. I look at different things. There's this New York Times poll. There's this CBS YouGov poll. There's all these things. And I'll be honest, Steve, I'm spun around at this point. I'm almost the numbers are just turning into mush in my head.
Here's what you need to know. The polling is bullshit. And the reporting on the polling is bigger bullshit. I'm not saying that it's not a close race. I'm not saying that these swing states are not tight. They probably are, although I do think that he's in trouble in Michigan and a couple other places. And I think that the margins are wider than they look on these polls. However, a couple of things listeners need to keep in mind. The New York Times comes out today with their national poll. And the headline is something to the effect that Trump has surged 4 points and is now up 48 to 47 nationally. Why is anybody doing a national poll? What's the point of polling the country? First of all, there is no purpose to it. It doesn't mean anything at all because it's not how the election is decided. Secondly, if you're going to tell me that Donald Trump has a lead in the popular vote in the United States, I got a bridge for you to sell, or to sell you, or whatever they say. It's ridiculous. No Republican has gotten more than 46 or 47% of the popular vote in the last 30 years, with one exception in 2004. That's it. It's ridiculous. The numbers are ridiculous. And when you start there, when you start with the fact that you and I both know that even if Donald Trump wins this election, he will not win the popular vote. If it mattered, he can't overcome the massive disparity in a place like California and New York and Illinois and these big, big states. So it doesn't matter. It's ridiculous to poll it in the first place. But then the numbers, they just contradict everything we know about electoral history, about the breakdown and the way people vote in this country. So you take that together, and then you question what's going on in these smaller sets, these swing state polls that they're doing that are really just subsets of whatever this national poll that they did was. And I just don't have any confidence in it. I just don't, because even if these numbers were quote unquote right, they are statistics with probability and margins of error. If Trump had been down by 3 and is now up by 1, it's the same thing. The race hasn't changed at all. It doesn't matter. If Harris is at 49 and Trump is at 47, they're tied. That's just the data, the statistics. That means that she could be as high as, I don't know what the margin of error is, but she could be as high as probably about 6 points, so 55, or as low as 43. And same for him. He could be as high as 53. He's not, but he could be. So all of that is absurd. And then you read the coverage of these absurd exercises in math and statistics, and it just makes my head explode. The National Review has a headline right now based off of the New York Times Siena poll that says it hammers home the reality that Harris is running out of gas. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't mean anything at all.
You're right. You're absolutely statistically correct. I mean, you're talking about statistics, but you are correct. Like a national poll actually doesn't matter that much. When you do a poll like that, it's more about creating chum for headlines. I feel like it was inevitable that we were going to see a swing in some way, shape, or form against Harris. It's almost like the narrative arc is so predictable now that I've done a number of election cycles where it's like, oh, well, I guess we've ran out of time for Harris. We've got to find something. We're going to go ahead and like go into this poll thing. I don't know where they got these numbers from. I know that from listeners, they're feeling less and less confident in polling because of sample sizes and all the other things, changes in technology. I'm with you on this, but I also wonder, is it also part of the need to keep the conversation going? I don't know. It just doesn't seem like reporting to me. It feels a lot more like I'm watching ESPN.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fair way to look at it. What's most frustrating is that a publication like the New York Times, with people there that know that the data that they're coming up with either does not comport with history and reality, in the case of their national poll suggesting that Donald Trump could ever be 3 or 4 points of her or any Democrat in the popular vote in this country. It's just ridiculous. But they know that, and they know that the shifts in these polls are statistically insignificant. So chill out, everybody. Calm down. You know, it's very hard to ignore what's going on and what people are saying, what the headlines say, and so on. But one of the things that's most interesting to me is the race hasn't changed much in a month. I mean, she's never had, even in these ridiculous polls, she never had a big lead. She had a lead within the margin of error. Now she still has a lead in the margin of error, and what, according to one pollster, and a little bit less than the other. It'll probably be close. We know what it looks like to have close elections, but a close election will usually tip towards the Democrat.
This is just anecdotal, but it feels like we're battling over a very small group of people that are going to decide this election, because most people I know, whatever side of the aisle they are on, they are very locked in. I don't know if this is different than before, but for me, it feels very calcified in a very small universe of maybes at this point.
That's definitely statistically the case. I think that the difference is that there are a lot of people who don't really want to vote for Trump, but haven't quite been sold on her because they don't feel like they know her well enough. And we'll see what happens Tuesday night. There's the big debate. There is a great potential for that debate to have a big impact. We used to say that, nobody cares about debates. And then we had the most consequential debate in the history of the country in June. And now all of a sudden, they really do matter. And the reason why they matter more than they used to is because if it's the last presidential debate we have this year, and it could be, it's also the last opportunity for Kamala Harris to capture the national attention in a big way. The rest of the campaign is a grind. This is the last time they'll have a major, huge audience. You and I talked about whether her convention speech worked, and it worked in as much as it didn't hurt her. Whether or not it helped her is another question. But I think that the country is really eager to see what she does next to Trump. If she can get him to seem as unhinged as he is voluntarily all over the country when he goes to speak, she'll be in pretty good shape.
So you really think that's going to be her goal with this? And what do you think his goal will be?
I honestly don't know why he's doing it. I don't know what his goal is. I guess his goal is to show the country that she's a flake, that she's not up to the task, that she's weak or soft in one way or another, to blame her for immigration and inflation and whatever. I don't know how he thinks about these things. I almost think he thinks about them in terms of opportunities to be in the center of the universe.
I think you're right. There's going to be a lot of attention on this debate. I know that I will be watching, but it seems like as well, there's just so much attention at the top of the ticket this year. And it's kind of evidenced by fundraising. A little interesting report since we last talked is that the Harris campaign and the Democratic National Committee sent nearly $25 million to support down ballot Democrats. Of course, Senator Gary Peters of Michigan is a big deal in the Senate committee for the Democrats. He's one of those guys who works behind the scenes and kind of just makes stuff go, is more of that kind of operator than like the speech barnstormer. It takes all kinds, but it is interesting because it is all about that top race. And you see it with the fundraising, you see it with the conversations. And as much as I'm really interested in some of like the local stuff, it really feels this year like, and more so than other years, that whatever is at the top, I hate to say the term because it is politically loaded, but kind of trickles down to everything else, or coattails, I guess is the appropriate term.
Well, I mean, she's got all the money. She's got more than she can possibly spend, I guess. I think that there is an argument to be made that giving that money to the local candidates to get the work done of getting people out to vote and persuading voters and motivating people has a benefit. I mean, somebody who's going to go out to vote for the state senator from their area is probably going to vote the same party at the top of the ticket. It's almost like they're seeding the ground game for the top of the ticket as well. I think it shows their confidence. I think it shows that they have numbers and data and instincts inside that Kamala Harris campaign that suggests she's doing better than what the polling is showing. And I think that she's fine with that. Like, Trump loses his mind when a poll suggests that he's losing. The Democrats don't do that. The Kamala Harris doesn't do that. She takes it as a reason to remind voters to get out and vote. That's what you're supposed to do. I think they know things. I think they know, based on just the sheer huge numbers of volunteers and individual donors that they have pulled out since the switch on the ticket. They know they have the momentum and they might as well create some coattails. And if these people do win along with her, then they owe her. And that's how politics works.
Yeah.
I do think it's interesting. You and I talked about this last week, I think, or the week before, about Senate race in Michigan and how both of the candidates are sort of running away from their party. I did get another one of those mailers from Mike Rogers, very expensive mailers. But actually, it wasn't from him. It was from the American Prosperity PAC. So it was one of those groups that's supporting him. But also, we're about to roll into this, but Joe Biden came to Ann Arbor. We talked about this last week, this question of why they're not heading to college towns to motivate the college vote and get volunteers and energy. And very astute observation that the Gaza issue would be in the face of the events. So Joe Biden came to Ann Arbor, but he came to Ann Arbor to sign an executive order related to something pro-union at a union hall in what's actually not even Ann Arbor. It's like Scioto Township, to the west of Ann Arbor, in a union facility.
Yeah, I want to say it's Plumbers and Pipe Fitters Training Center, I believe, out there.
Yeah, there's two unions that use that facility, and that's all well and good. But there was Debbie Dingell with him, but not Alyssa Slotkin, not the congresswoman who's running for Senate. And I still just don't understand this campaign and its intense need to not be seen with top ticket Democrats or national figures.
Yeah, and I want to put a little, like, a distinguisher there, because, there was that Kamala airport stop earlier where she was present, but since then, yes, there will be things on social media, but you're right about the direct appearance, and it feels like on social media it's kind of one way. I feel like it's kind of that way on both sides of this thing, where it's like we're going to play footsie with one group, but I think that's part of that concern about that middle group, because they both come from areas where they know that there's going to be a universe of voters where there's a lot of toss-up here, and Slotkin has an inherent advantage, but she doesn't want to cede that advantage. And it does have a background with the Obama administration and working. I believe she worked with the CIA, like more of that middle of the road Democrat kind of situation. So she knows how to play that world well.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things she's been doing her whole political career is really dining out on the fact that she has photos of herself with both Obama and George W. Bush in the Oval Office from her days in intelligence. That is true. I think that maybe coming up in the next couple, we might see a closer connection between the talking and Kamala Harris. What I understand is that after the debate, Harris and Walz are going to be going on this, what they call barnstorming tour of the country. And what the Harris campaign has said it will be is basically the campaign making stops in every media market in every swing state. If it's Nevada, that's only 3 places. But in Michigan, what does that mean? That means the Detroit area, the Grand Rapids area, the UP. I don't know. I mean, how many media markets do we have?
Yeah, like I guess so. You've got Metro Detroit, Lansing, Grand Rapids, and then there's like a smaller like UP upper part of the state market. Because I have a bunch of friends who work through television. I used to work in TV news, and the running gag is you kind of go through Alpena at one point or another. I never did, but I had many friends who would work at the Alpena station. It seemed to be like a rite of passage.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me. In Illinois, it was Rockford.
Okay.
Yeah, there's always a place that nobody wants to be at, but everybody goes through at some point, or Peoria in Illinois. And I'll be interested to see if when the campaign comes into town, and I'm not clear whether that means that both of presidential and vice presidential candidates will be together in all of those places. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like there'll probably be a couple joint appearances, but also you can cover a lot of ground by splitting up and hitting different demographics. Speaking of differing demographics, one thing that showed up, there are some developments with this U of M Board of Regents candidate situation.
Yep.
And there's now a lawsuit. I feel like there's some popcorn involved in this one because this is getting a little bit more heated than I thought it would.
It's getting exactly as heated as I thought it would. Because it was just a weird situation that was just crying out to get weirder. So the Democratic Party did not put, for whatever reason, I don't understand it, they did not put the University of Michigan Regents candidates on the primary ballot for the entire populace to vote on. Instead, they simply had a vote at the state convention in Lansing at the end of August. And at that convention, there were 3 candidates for 2 slots on the Board of Regents in Michigan. And one of them went to an incumbent regent, and the other ended up going to a former regent who also has some ties to the Democratic Party and so on. But the third candidate is a Palestinian American woman and a lawyer, which is important, who was recruited to run for this seat by the student activists who have been agitating for the University of Michigan to divest from companies associated with Israel because of the Gaza military campaign, which they call genocide. They managed to get this lawyer to run for them, and hundreds of them went to Lansing, signed up to be at the convention and vote. The voting took place, and the Palestinian woman, she actually got the most raw votes. But the Democratic Party has a formula for weighting votes depending on where the people are from. I'm not really sure I understand what the purpose of it is, other than that there's some effort to be fair to the geographic diversity of the state. The point is that nobody knows what their formula is. So she got the most votes, but she didn't win the nomination. She spent the next week trying to get the party to tell her what happened. And there was some drama around how the votes were counted, who was present, what votes were counted, just a lot of yucky stuff in there. So she filed a lawsuit because they wouldn't tell her, and now she wants to go to court about it. I don't know how far this is going to go. If it even gets to the point of discovery, if it even gets to the point of a hearing where the Democratic Party of Michigan has to defend what its scheme is to decide who gets on this ballot, it's going to be very embarrassing. And it just picks at the heart of the biggest problem with democratic unity in the state, which is that huge numbers of students and Arabs and Muslims are very unhappy with the Biden policies on Gaza and the establishment democratic position of supporting Israel. This could inflame things. If this goes badly, you could have a lot of people who may choose not to vote at all or not vote for president. And those are votes that Kamala Harris's campaign needs to win the state. She has to have that large block of Muslim and Arab voters around the Detroit suburbs. We'll see what happens this week. I'm sure there'll be court movement on it, because if there's not, I don't know how they get the ballots out in time. And we'll see what happens.
It will be interesting to watch. I think this is the kind of thing that any other candidate but Donald Trump, this rears its head in an even uglier way, right? Because like Donald Trump has been very clear about where he's going to go with all of this stuff. So like you're kind of between a rock and a hard place with your choices. But if you had another Republican candidate in a universe that maybe could peel some things off, it would be a different situation. It's interesting to see that, again, if there was any other candidate but Donald Trump, Republicans would actually be in a better state in the general.
Oh, of course. That was always sort of the terrifying prospect to a lot of Democrats of somebody like Ron DeSantis. Before he got out there and opened his mouth and people realized he really isn't that great of a politician. But there will be one. There will be somebody who sees how Trump handled his political campaigns, will understand how to do it better and less polarizing, and yet will really have the same goals and aspirations. That's always been the fear the Democrats have had, is that the Republicans aren't going to back off of their Trumpism for whatever that means, just because Trump himself can't win the election.
Right. Yeah. It's going to be something to watch in the next few years, especially because, there's only so much more time that Donald Trump can actually physically be on the stage, because he is now the oldest candidate. Who knew?
Look, the fact of the matter is that if Donald Trump loses this election and wants to be the Republican nominee in 2028, he will be the Republican nominee in 2028.
You're right. Facts. I can't even argue with that. 100% agree. It's going to be something. All right. Well, Steve Freeze, it's always good to talk to you. I know we're going to catch up after the debate, so I'm looking forward to seeing how all of this plays out in the next week or so. And I feel smarter after talking with you. And also, thank you for being a podcast version of Tums or an antacid about those polls, because I tell you, it's just been so much where it's like, what am I supposed to be watching? And then it's like, maybe I shouldn't be watching so hard.
No, you shouldn't. The data means nothing, and it's there to agitate people. And it will be what it will be. If you are somebody who is politically active and out there trying to make it happen, you will work as hard as you can to make whatever you want happen. Whether the polls say this or that, you should just keep on keeping on.
Steve Freeze, freelance journalist for the New York Times, Newsweek, and many others, and writes the weekly newsletter for the Ann Arbor Observer. You can find that at the A2 View. Thank you so much. It's good to talk to you. We'll catch up soon.
Okay, you too.